Hello guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. So, today we are gonna see, what if Izuku had mythical quirk and got harem, part 2. Subscribe if you enjoy the video. Let's begin the story. It was hell doing introductions, but now Midoriya could at least focus on keeping himself together. He'd never had such potent episodes before. In fact, his back was still slightly sore from the shifting. He noticed that they were coming more and more often, even before yesterday morning in the bathroom. He didn't recognize the cause for this, but it certainly was alarming. For now, he would simply enjoy the breather he was having. Looking down at his table, it was somewhat surreal seeing the sight before him. All of Class 1 is sat at one big table, chatting idly with one another. Not a single one of them tried to berate him or force him to sit somewhere else. Hello Izuku Midoriya, right? Izuku turned to meet Teal eyes staring curiously. Yeah? My name's Itsuka Kendo. I wanted to ask you about your quirk, I'd be lying if I said it wasn't to know you better. She finished with a soft smile. The Chako was sitting in front of him while Kitsuki was beside him, but Itsuka was one seat apart from Uraraka. With her seating position, she unintentionally pulled some of the other students' attention, which went unnoticed by Midoriya. He wasn't sure how to answer her question. The reasoning for his poor description during introductions was because he wanted his quirk to be vague. Well, what exactly do you want to know? For starters, how does the enhancement happen, and how many kinds of powers do you have? My quirk sort of temporarily evolves my body, this is the activation, and my body stays safe. I have selected all kinds of options to use, as far as I can use them. Choji, Jiru, and Kirishima were intrigued by the implied power. The others in his class, even the intelligent Yaoi Rozu, took it as though he was godly. Their very same impression was voiced by Kendo, who was gawking at the slightly more descriptive explanation. Wait, you evolve. You're kind of godly. I mean all that power with no backfire is pretty awesome. Izuku's eyes widened only a smidge. Once again, her take was based on the implications. It may have been simple in wording, but having a whole arsenal of abilities at your command and being able to use them without repercussion was pretty high up. It aligned perfectly with a deity, a being who willed its desires to fruition by the divine might that rallied them worship. Many would be flattered at the praise, but to Izuku, such a title was the catalyst of his disease. His own face portrayed the wrong emotion for the comparison, though none of it was towards Kendo. Internally, he deeply frowned at his label, scowled even. You have no idea how wrong or ironic that is. His quirk's basis allowed something one could consider the devil's work in even the most sane of environments. He wanted to avert the conversation to something else, anything that wasn't his quirk if he really had to keep talking. Kitsuki noticed Izuku's eagerness, but did nothing once he noted how his rival's desperation plucked up courage for him. Actually, each power has its own minor setback. His stutter was nearly gone, showing Bakugo from the side just how bad he wanted this subject to end. They can be treated as their own quirk, and I can only do it F4 times a day. It's kind of like a video game save system. Kirishima interjected with a toothy grin and raised brow. How did you just compare a powerhouse quirk to a video game? Well, my body can only do so many alterations to it, you could see that as a game's limited save space. My enhancements are the saved files or games, and my limit is the save slots. The heroes in training were silently impressed, they themselves had never done such a simple comparison, but still made an effective reflection. They could definitely see he wasn't stupid. They also noticed there was some humility to his words. I'm not as powerful as you think, I need to train things like my limit and the strength of some of the augments. Bakugo and Uraraka already had an idea, so they weren't really surprised at his answer. The other students however were a little surprised at his personality and the altruism in his demeanor. With the answer finally satisfying Kendo, no one else bothered to ask further. Meanwhile in the teacher's lounge, so Ryuko, you've got the boy in your class? Asked Midnight. She was awfully eager to meet Izuku, which made some of the other teachers worry for his safety. Yes, and he's vastly different from the footage. Did you meet him during the exams? I actually met him before his youthful display. Kaya, such chivalry is definitely his charm. She cupped her cheek in one hand, letting her free one swipe his file off the table. He was on a trial with Recovery Girl, who gave him a quick wink before he turned into a cute mess. Ryukyu could only sweat drop at the sultry hero's antics, but she herself had to be honest and agree with her. He was adorable, like a fluffy green puppy. There was much about the boy that confused her still. The forest-haired teen had might similar to her own, she would even argue it at least threatened all might. Midoriya's personality and nature is a far cry from someone of such caliber however, there was simply more to it than just it being his natural mannerisms. The other occupant of the lounge was reading through Izuku's file, finding that he was a bit of a ghost in terms of his personal information. It was their bare essentials of citizenship, and there was practically nothing that accentuated his talent. Being a recommended student, advocated by the No.1 hero no less, surely meant there was notable merit in file. Alas, there was nothing, and the Vixen's class was coming up. She supposed it could wait for another time, or she can learn from Midoriya himself. Of all the students she had messed with, the timid forest-haired boy was not someone Midnight would have thought to pay more attention to. Namuri Kayama always made a point to accentuate her sexually themed popularity, using suggestive phrasing and flirtatious manners to get her point across. They were empty in meaning, yet full of intent. Remembering her casual wink at the nomination, she hadn't expected her to want it to mean more. Having witnessed such feats of courage was endearing to her, which was strange considering her common demeanor would have made it appealing in other ways. So why was this a tad bit more emotional than usual? Perhaps it was how he worried over a stranger or the fact that he practically switched from a scared onlooker to a shining knight. His eyes when they looked at her weren't out of carnal thought despite her appearance, it was of admiration and excitement of a pure kind. Midnight wasn't sure if that was all, or simply just her usual mood kicking in. Making her way over to the one classroom, she could hear the students conversing lightly. She tried to make out Midoriya's voice from the other side, if he was saying anything in the first place given his social skills. Opening, she was greeted by her student already seated and hopping with flustered excitement at her arrival. She spotted a mop of green in the far right behind Bakugo. "We've got all year to figure you out, Midoriya." 2 hours later. Aoi Rozu would secretly glance over at Midoriya, there was an interest she could not explain. This eagerness was new to her, the curiosity brought up by certain feelings. By no means was she crushing on someone she just met, but it was a very warm, almost serene feeling. The flash of something kept overwhelming her with no warning, she was only snapped out of it by her newest friend. Kyakujiru noticed her eyeing up Midoriya, after all, she was doing it too to a lesser degree. "Hey Yanamamo. Something about green over there?" she asked. "Pardon? There's something odd about him. I don't know why, but the feeling is warm and I feel it has something to do with his actions during the exams. Must be a strange thing to hear and say for you, isn't it?" "Nah. Pretty sure the whole class is a little confused about him. Didn't expect Midoriya to be this shy, kinda weird seeing the guy who blew down a zero-pointer act all jumpy." She displayed a mild disinterest by twirling her earjack around her finger. Both weren't too concerned with knowing Izuku as a friend, although he seemed a decent one for sure. It was kind of like dealing with an itch, you just wanted to scratch it, but couldn't. Yaoi Rozu brought it on par with the frustration of trying to remember something. Wait, memories. 10 minutes later. Finally, the bell rang, and the first years began to make their way home. It built all the more anticipation for dormitory life. The whole body could only imagine how close or different it would be from normal home life. Midoriya was one to be thinking of such things, though he was pulled from thought for his attention. "Midoriya, may I have a word with you?" called Iida. "Oh, hey Iida. Sure. I'd like to say that you're already an inspiration to me and the class. You were a recommended student who possibly risked everything for another and came through in such endeavors. I hope that we may associate on goodwill." "Well, thank you. That means a lot actually." The words were blowing some things out of proportion, but it was endearing nonetheless. It was a bit forward for him and definitely not a typical Izuku thing to do, but he asked something that was a little presumptuous. "You know, why not act more than just associates? Would I be in the wrong for asking to be a friend?" Midoriya averted his nervous eyes to the ground, his head turned to the left. He shakily extended a hand in hopes it would be received well. And to his surprise, it was. "Of course, Midoriya," said Iida as he shook Izuku's hand. "I would be honored to call you friend." His assuring smile almost sent Izuku to tears. Almost. "Hey, wait up. You're both heading for the train station." In a sense of deja vu, Midoriya saw Uraraka running her way up to them. He noticed Bakugo wasn't anywhere in sight. "Oh, hey Uraraka. You could join us if you want." "Nice. You're Iida, right? Nice to meet you. The pleasure is all mine." With a few stiff motions and 90 bows, Uraraka laughed at his intense formality. For Izuku, this was what he lacked his entire life. Still, a hole remained in his heart and he hadn't the slightest clue why it wasn't filled, how the void grew in fact. Bakugo had gotten picked up, but he was still in Midoriya's mind to be appreciated. He took in the sight and moments of Uraraka and Iida beside him. The moments in which Bakugo acknowledged his strength and acted like a friend. It made his heart clench and feel warm, yet it also made him yearn to fill in his missing piece. He'd figure it out later, as he did much in life. For the time being, his life was just 3 friends walking home. 2 hours later, Izuku had finished dinner with his mother and wanted to text any of his friends to see how it felt. The warmth of human connection was almost ironic given his quirk's abilities, as if he himself was a joke for darker humor. In a moment of apprehension, he quickly shifted his back. It felt odd how his spine curved and then flattened back out. His shoulder blades loosely slid down to accommodate the start of a protrusion. Just as fast as Izuku changed his body, he returned to his state. Years of quirk suppression had been the cause of these episodes, what puzzled was the recent increase in occurrences. It was almost every 3 days now, when it used to be once every 2 weeks. It was like his quirk had its own ideas and consciousness, it wanted to be set free like a caged beast. A beast. He knew this first month was just the tip of the iceberg for his time at UA. He could feel the power deep inside him crawling at the chance to break its chains and bend him to its will. He needed to learn control, and he needed to learn fast. One of his mythology books was laying on the ground. As he picked it up, he hesitated to joke about how his interest almost perfectly lined up with his life. Myth-speaking warriors making themselves known in history by slaying evil, the highest calling of those with a courageous heart. It developed his quirk to read such stories and their histories. Altogether he forgot about texting his new friends and stood contemplating that empty hole in his will. Standing atop a capstone of potential and opportunity, he found it almost devoid of value in his wake. Izuku was grateful of course to be blessed with such events, but he didn't know how to perceive the changes in his life. The dogma of both mythical and real heroes was to etch their names into history by defeating their exact opposite. They are praised for their deeds, but all who were the greatest had a common quality: it was for the sake of others. All Might rose to fame as the greatest hero of all by driving his power for the well-being of others, and other legends like Beowulf slayed beasts out of gratitude and debt, later becoming a fair king for his people instead of himself. Neither held back in the pursuit of the just and righteous, but Midoriya hated his quirk. Would it pervert the very essence of a hero to use its full potential, or would he disgrace it by using it? It was a struggle he would leave for another time. Reading the cover of his book once more, he set to his daily work. Native American culture in the United States of America. Appalachian edition. That night was a troublesome 8 hours of sleep, his quirk constantly pushing out in his mind. It was begging for release, and its owner didn't know how deserving he was of giving it freedom to do so, or granting himself that liberation by never using it. Midoriya's letter revealing his passing was a hologram projection from All Might, which was a bit of a shock. Rumors of what had been confirmed to him by the projection had spread. All Might was a teacher of the UA Heroics department. Izuku was excited for the lesson ahead, though it seemed as though he, and he alone, was aware of All Might's position. Only further confirming this was the fact that Toshinori had admitted to being his tar substitute for his absences. The other students were running on pieces of media gossip pertaining to his employment. At last, he heard it. The class immediately perked up at his laugh, looking to the door in anticipation, as if it would spit him out rather than serve as entry. "I am coming through a door like a normal person." All Might flourished his chest forward while holding on to the doorframe. "Whoa, the rumors are true. All Might is a teacher. Isn't that a Silver Age costume? It's giving me chills. He's a lot bigger than I expected." Midoriya finally laid eyes on the man responsible for his enrollment, who in secret actually stood in front of him several times, but Izuku didn't need to know that yet. His idol had approved of his dream and supported him all the way, albeit from a distance. Now, he had the honor and privilege to learn his ethic and knowledge. "Welcome to basic heroics training. I will be overseeing your class, and you will receive the most credit from these lessons, as expected of course." All Might surveyed the room, and in Toshinori's mind he knew this was probably a bad idea, but what the hell. Midoriya needed some confidence anyway. "Well, I'm not going to play favorites nor will I be biased, but I'm going to get this out of the way real quick at kinetic speeds." All Might snaps his head in Midoriya's direction and yells out, much to Izuku's mild dismay. "Young Midoriya, my boy, how's my recommended student doing?" The class of course turned to Midoriya and let the information sink in for 2 seconds. After the allotted time, they erupted. "You were recommended by All Might." Well, of course he was. "With everlasting kindness, he healed my my secretary's injury. He's smart, humble, and strong. How could I turn away a plea for a recommendation to the UA after hearing of such a miracle?" No one argued with the symbol of peace, but made a mental note to ask Izuku about the encounter. Now then, on with the lesson. Today, we're going to start off with a bang, and this exercise will pull no punches. All Might flashed a card in front of them with the word battle in red. Bakugo silently murmured combat in front of Izuku. He was wondering if maybe he should tell him to hold back to prevent mass homicide. He felt his whole body quiver. He'd never used his quirk on a person before aside from healing. Midoriya knew that through all the excitement, his quirk would become hyperactive from the stimulation of being used. It was now or never, shape up or risk being seen by those who haven't withdrawn their kindness yet. All those years of being alone and shunned were behind him, and this was the first sliver of hope that maybe his new peers wouldn't do the same. He ran a hand through his fluff of green hair and noticed All Might lifting a remote after saying something. From the wall, racks of suitcases with labeled numbers appeared. "These costumes have been created to your specifications and reported details of your quirk. Change into these and head on down to field beta. Oh man, please don't let anyone laugh at my costume. It's just what I felt like wearing." Izuku really didn't feel like being embarrassed on the second day of class. 10 minutes later, after changing in a reclusive spot, he made his way over to the training field. His costume was certainly a little attention-grabbing, but he wanted to look cool and feel comfortable with every one of his enhancements. He was wondering what Bakugo's and Uraraka's costumes would look like. He'd had an idea about Bakugo, as he suggested a few things for his costume. Meanwhile at Field Beta, they say the clothes make the pros, and you all certainly fit the bill. You all look awesome. Wow Ida, cool costume. You look like a shining knight. Thank you Uraraka. I must say the space theme fits well with your quirk. She giggled bashfully, as her costume had come out a little more suggestive than intended. Her costume was a black skin-tight spot with rounded bracers and boots. It had a thick pink stripe going down the middle and a small waist guard. Her helmet was fitted to her head shape and was set with a visor. Iida's costume was a black bodysuit covered in white metal armor. His helmet held a distinct similarity to a knight's, and exhaust pipes extended from his sides. His boots were bulked around the calves for the engines. She could have sworn it looked familiar. Hey, you two extras seen Izuku? Nerd's gonna be marked absent if he doesn't show up. Both Iida and Uraraka hitched slightly at their known hothead's design choice. He wore a chaotic mask and had a spiky accessory clipped to his neck. He had collar guards that resembled tiny RPGs. His attire consisted of a tight sleeveless top that showed his musculature well. He had combat bottoms and boots made of black leather. What was most notable, however, was what they assumed to be a support item for function rather than cosmetics. They were massive, and they mean massive gauntlets that were styled after grenades, which obviously had a use if the lever design on the clip was anything to go by. Being the bombing blonde, Iida and Uraraka were afraid to ask what it was for and shuddered when they imagined what exactly he would call a demonstration. Where's young Midoriya? Well, never mind that, I'll just continue the exercise until he. Sorry I'm late All Might sir. Izuku came running out with what could be assumed was a smile by his uncovered eyes. The girls blushed and gawked at his choice, while the guys simply cheered him for the appeal of it, Kirishima saying it was super manly. Perhaps it was because he was in a sort of high or because he felt at home with his costume, but Midoriya was only slightly bashful at his reception. He was internally relieved that they didn't make fun of him. Midoriya was wearing a white, shaggy robe that reached just above his calves and had an opening in front, his face hidden behind a metallic violet mask with a red bottom lip. Ng3 regent of the mask with the mentioned colors. Face only, not the cloak. His sleeveless arms were wrapped in flowing bandages up to his elbows, with all kinds of Greek symbols written on them, which Yaoi Rozu noticed were similar to the alchemical pagan beliefs of said time. His cloak was tightly bonded to his waist by an equally epic-looking gold sash. Further down was his white Kevlar combat pants and combat boots accented in gold. What was notable about it was how form-fitting it was, the arms in particular being nicely hidden in the wraps. His muscular build made minor ruffles across the robe and made it obvious how chiseled out he was. All Might brought the attention back to himself. The day's exercise will be indoor battles between teams of heroes and villains. Lots of the flashy stuff is done out on the streets, but statistically speaking, most of the real battle and danger happens in the shadows. That's because true villains these days know to stray from the public eye in our hero society. The teams will be decided by lots. Iida raised his hand for a question, only to be answered by Izuku. Sir, why are the teams being decided so haphazardly? In a real-life situation, heroes don't usually have the chance to coordinate with agencies for team-ups prior to missions. They can happen on the spot, and that means they're spontaneous with no background to them. This way we can be as close to the real thing, albeit from select options. I see. Thank you Midoriya. Apologies for the interruption All Might. Said Iida in his now signature 90 bow. All Might waved it off. It's nothing young Iida. Now Izuku, and the class sweat dropped when he pulled a script out of nowhere. Did he seriously need that to teach? The scenario is this. The villains have hunkered down in a building with an armed weapon. The heroes must infiltrate the complex and either secure the weapon or capture the villains. The evildoers can secure a victory by defending till the time runs out or by eliminating the heroes in similar fashion. If anything goes too far, I'll step in. Now, let's draw teams. Now in the monitor room, Midoriya eyed the hero team of Sato and Kota as they entered the complex of the villain team, consisting of Kirishima and Shiro. He analyzed how he used the birds for reconnaissance and others' use of their quirks. Midoriya looked nice again at the matches. Heroes. Akito Sato and Koji Kuta vs villains. Kirishima and Hanta Shiro. Heroes. Mizo Shaoji and Shadow Todoroki vs villains. Mashiro Aojiro and Toru Hagakure. Heroes. Denki Kaminari and Kayaka Jiru vs Momo Yaoi Rozu and Ichako Uraraka. Heroes. Sayu Asui and Fumikage Tokoyami vs villains. Yuga Aoyama and Mina Shido. Heroes. Itusuka Kendo and Izuku Midoriya vs villains. Kitsuki Bakugo and Tenya Iida. He was the last one, along with the girl from lunch. He didn't know how to feel about this. He was up against his rival in their first heated battle for the underhand. So, you're nervous? We're almost up. Izuku looked behind him and was met by Kendo. Her well-endowed figure was hugged by a dark green kipao and corset. She had a bandit's mask on with flowing ribbon tails. It was a simple look, but it was enough to send Midoriya into a blush with how well her assets were accentuated. Yeah. It's just that we're up against Katsuki. He's so amazing compared to me. Izuku steered his eyes to Itsuka once more to see a genuine smile on her face for encouragement. Hey, don't put yourself down. I know you said you have a lot to improve and all, but I'm personally glad I'm with you. I actually think you're stuck with me. Her smile was betrayed by the crestfallen glint in the eyes. I mean, all I do is make my hands bigger, big deal. It didn't matter how well Midoriya knew someone, a downtrodden look wasn't for anyone. He steeled his nerves and unknowingly entered his hero high to lift her spirits up. He began with small smile on his lips and continued with comforting words. I may not know the finer details of your quirk, but I can definitely say that you're strong. I have to look out for multiple weaknesses among a plethora of other things, while you can focus on strengthening an already amazing quirk. Itsuka's eyes widened a little at his sudden encouragement. We're in the UA to get better, so don't beat yourself up so much, okay? Izuku finished with a blinding smile. Itsuka wasn't expecting such heartfelt words from the shy boy, especially after her interaction with him yesterday. He seemed hesitant and so conscious of himself. Right now, however, she could tell that Midoriya was confident in each of his words and he wasn't pulling them out of his ass. Do you really think I'm amazing? Asked Itsuka with a light blush. He nodded and said with a sincere smile, you're Itsuka of Class 1A. That's enough for me to think so. She fought the redness coming to her face down. Thanks. She couldn't contain her smile after that. As the second round started, Bakugo's curiosity began to peak. He wasn't someone to snoop in another's life, as he didn't care for the extras. His rival was on his level though, that made Izuku a whole different story. Itsuki hadn't been there for Izuku because they weren't on friendly nor hostile terms. A simple hello was such a blank expression between the two that it almost couldn't count as one. Now they were locked in a heated but respectful rivalry, something that was new to him after being unmatched by many for so long. Right now, Katsuki needed some smaller questions answered that were more from an inquisitorial standpoint. Hey, nerd. Can I ask you a few things? He spoke loud enough to get a few others' attention. Sure. What do you ask? He cocked his eyebrows in confusion. We weren't always on speaking terms, so I want to ask you a few things I'm wondering about. Well, ask away. A faint smile made his lips. It was a small gesture, sure. The fact that someone wanted to know more about him was nice. That is until Bakugo said something he was hoping to leave behind. For starters, what the hell did those extras mean by calling Deku? Everyone listening in, especially Uraraka and Itsuka, noticed the violent flinch from the smaller boy's frame. The sudden movement even made him stumble back a bit, enough for Kirishima to move forward a little in case Izuku fell back. Kendo settled a hand on Midoriya's shoulder for reassurance. Somehow, Katsuki had enough awareness to see his discomfort. Look, if you don't want to answer right now, it's okay. You asked Uraraka to walk up to him for comfort before he continued. Deku was a nickname for me. I didn't have my quirk until I was 6. Itsuka noticed how his stutter and timidity came back full force. It obviously wasn't an easy topic. They said I was useless and I didn't show my quirk once I got it for personal issues. So I continued it. It's from the word defenseless Izuku. It means useless. The ones who were listening were in shock. Kirishima and Mina already had an idea about the treatment of quirkless people. No picture they painted was a museum piece. Katsuki was grimacing the entire time. He hadn't realized just how much he was ignorant about. Aoi Rozu and Iida were still with clear horror in their eyes, their lips set in deep frowns. They had been sheltered from such animosity and despicable people, but to see the damage themselves made them quiver in sorrow at what the process was like. Finally, Uraraka spoke up with her own fiery compassion for Izuku. You know, it kinda sounds like Takeru. Like you can do it. She immediately regretted saying those words, as even behind the mask you could tell Midoriya wasn't so sure about it. His next words gave her relief, and yet were also a surprise. It didn't make them any less heartwarming, however. If that's what it could mean to you all, then you could call me Deku if you want. He looked up and thought the eye holes of his mask, green pools, stared back at them with a kind of mirthless smile underneath. There was some hope in them that they couldn't pinpoint the reason for, but they took it as a sign that he would be okay. Third set of participants, please make your way to the exercise building. Called All Might. The 4 students made their way to the building, but left with smiles. It was a hug in Uraraka's case that left him blushing. Kirishima spoke up next before turning to the screen. Hey man, I'm still not comfortable with calling you Deku, but just know that we've got your back. Especially me, that's what bros are for, right? His signature toothy grin was given for confirmation. Thanks Kirishima. It means a lot. After a minute or so, one other finally gathered the courage to get Izuku's attention. Hey, I'm Midoriya. Izuku turned to see Itsuka cutely shuffling in place and a sweet smile on her face. I didn't really say anything during all that, but I'm here for you too. You're amazing cause you're part of class 1A, like me. I'm even more glad to be on your team, Deku. Izuku couldn't contain his slightly watery smile. Thank you. I'm glad to call you a friend. Itsuka's smile got even brighter and sweeter as the two now watched the screens, side by side. Kitsuki looked from the sides feeling slightly guilty for asking the question, but he felt his pride swell upon seeing his rival happy again. It was known to care about someone, but he wasn't gonna show them that he was getting soft right now. Maybe later. Nah. Izuku leaned against the street railing while he devised a plan. Now in his usual muttering state, Itsuka could only suppress an amused giggle at his word vomit. It was honestly impressive to see someone go through information so quickly. She tapped his shoulder to see if he had anything, snapping him out of his mutter storm. Midoriya, got a plan. Her smile soon spread to Midoriya, as embarrassed as he was. Sorry about that. Well, as far as plans go, me and Kitsuki have a good rivalry and he doesn't like being told what to do. He's bound to come after me, leaving Iida to defend the bomb. Your quirk can cover a good amount of space, so he'll be trying to maneuver around your hands while defending the bomb. Do you think you can go after the weapon while I hold off Kitsuki? Rightio boss. Giggled Itsuka. She was impressed. The plan analyzed the situation and even the psychology of it. Now it was a matter of execution and fists. Your 5 minutes are up. Hero team, please begin the exercise. Yelled All Might from the monitor room. Well, here goes nothing. Midoriya was then enveloped by familiar veins of gold and purple, surprising everyone who hadn't expected them. Flames began swirling out of his hair and eyes, some small sparks came off his fingertips. This combo should do. Meanwhile in the monitor room, whoa, look at Midori. He looks so cool. Mina bounced with excitement on the display. Uraraka still wasn't sure what it was, but she was impressed either way. It felt kind of warm seeing his powers again, the memory of him saving her from the zero-pointer etched into her mind. She was unaware of another girl whose head swirled in thoughts of the boy. Aoirozu watched in suspense as Midoriya and Kendo jumped up to the second floor. Momo's thoughts were so discombobulated, she wasn't entirely sure what was causing them. She knew she had interest in her peers, but the reason for such a development was scattered and hard to pinpoint. It was leaving her with more questions that she was ready to have. The flash of something in her head was all she had to go on. For some reason, Yaoirozu felt that the Matryoshka doll she made had something to do with the familiarity, but that stood aside for now. The match was of importance currently, so all she could do was watch and listen. Back down at the building, Midoriya and Kendo snuck around the second floor hall, hugging the wall as the former signaled their advancement. Itsuki will definitely come after me to prove he's better right now. I can only hope that my powers don't get out of hand. Once he neared the corner, Bakugo shot out from the hall and rocketed towards them with an open palm. His smile was pure confidence in his victory. His open hand collided with the wall and broke it to pieces. Izuku had dived over his partner and moved them out of harm's way. What's the matter, Deku, weren't we rivals? He noticed Itsuka was alright, if only a little disoriented. Kendo, are you okay? Can you still make it to the weapon? Yeah, I'm fine enough to make it there. At her confirmation, Izuku gritted his teeth before smiling excitedly at Bakugo. He lunged forward and sped out of sight, then Kitsuki suddenly went flying back down the hall as pain shot through his side. Izuku had maneuvered at such a speed that he actually came from the other side of the broken wall, striking him with a front kick. Bakugo held his side and looked up to see Izuku's eyes lit with determination. Kendo took the opportunity to run away, Midoriya's incredible reflexes and kick still fresh in her head. She giggled with excitement of her own as she carried on for the bomb. Bakugo clearly didn't care for her departure as his own smile grew with anticipation. Bakugo charged forward with an explosion, prompting Izuku to guard in a boxing stance. He redirected his body to the right and went in with a hook only to be grabbed mid-air upon contact. Midoriya hugged Bakugo's arm to his left side and shifted himself hip to hip, pulling him over to slam him in the ground. Bakugo's spit flew from his mouth and Izuku backed off for a breather. He was so busy keeping the blonde busy, he hadn't noticed his earpiece had somehow come loose and fell elsewhere. Bakugo slowly clambered up with a groan, he then laughed as he took a battle stance again. Damn. Now this is what's made you my rival, Izuku. You still want to go? Izuku only smiled brighter, not knowing that his next words would be heard through his earpiece and the monitor room. I'm always aiming to do my best, Kitsuki. I've always wanted to be a hero. Izuku spewed flames from his right hand to force Bakugo to advance, breathing it out as he got close. Kitsuki jumped up with an explosion to blind him before turning mid-air to punt in the middle of his back. Izuku felt his back shift ever so slightly from the sudden pain, but he ignored it in favor of the moment. We both idolized All Might. Even with how little we spoke, I knew that much. Seeing you with your quirk and talent, it still amazes me to this day. Izuku rolled to the left as Katsuki lunged with a combustion. Izuku stayed low from the side and shot his foot behind him in a kick. His boot met Bakugo's jaw, both now on the floor. Katsuki kept the offensive going and ran at Izuku. He jumped and stomped him on the ground next to his head after Midoriya dodged. Midoriya then wrapped Bakugo's ankle in his left hand and put his right over the thigh, shooting his right foot to hit Katsuki in the jaw once more. Still holding the leg, Midoriya stood once more and grabbed Katsuki's right shoulder, tossing him to a wall. The blonde left a parting gift in the form of an explosion to Midoriya's chest. Their exchange set them apart, far enough to cease the engagements, but still keep a stare down going. I've always looked up to you, Katsuki, no matter how little we knew one another. I'm with you in the UA, where I will prove everyone who's ever doubted me wrong. The two sprinted towards one another, but Midoriya summoned the gold and purple lines again. He surged it through his veins and stomped to fly upwards from the impact. He placed both feet on the roof and breathed flames from his mouth downwards. Katsuki then sent an explosion his way as he maneuvered around the torrent. The next thing he did surprised everyone, even Almighty, who was a little more familiar with his powers. Izuku began to inhale the blast through a small parting in his mask's lips, still clinging to the roof by burning incisions for his fingers into it. He dropped down and looked up at Katsuki. His determination shined through the mask, green eyes refusing to waver. It only served to make Katsuki even more amped up. Endo could hear Izuku's words through her earpiece, and it was making him feel fond of the boy. It lit a fire under her to keep pushing forward, finally finding the weapon in a room. Iida was making it hard to suppress her laughter as he was acting out the most campy villain impression possible. There you are, a hero. Alas, you are in no position to cease my evil plans, and I will decimate your legacy. Itsuka looked past the act and smirked at the implied challenge. He enlarged her fists to a frightening size and charged forward to try and grip the bomb, but Iida lifted the paper contraption with ease and sped down an exit. Her only reaction was a smile because she had devised a plan of her own. From the layout map, she could tell they were close to a corner. Taking Izuku's advice, she was going to cut off his roots after positioning herself in a space that's easier to cover. She made chase after her charge, confident in her plan. Back at the monitor room, dude, these guys are insane. They're super strong. Man, I wish I was as talented as those guys. Kaminari was met with a chorus of agreements, but Yaoi Rozu could tell otherwise. We can't dismiss their efforts as just being natural to them. You can clearly see their hard work in mastering their quirks. An excellent observation by young Yaoi Rozu. In fact, Midoriya is a martial arts practitioner. Bakugo also shows an impressive sense of battle and combat prowess. All Might was beaming with pride. The next successor was a work of art, a hero in truth. He knew in his heart that he would be more than just someone he chose to pass one for all to. Instead, he would become something of a far greater legacy. Midoriya's words were coming through the monitor and Itsuka's earpiece, which had fallen out somewhere in the scuffle with Iida. It was still audible, and all could hear loud and clear his next words. At the exercise building, Itsuki watched Izuku pull his mask off, eyes set to burn a hole in anything that got in his way. I looked up to All Might, but you were the one actually in my life. I need to be as amazing as the both of you, and I'm going to start by winning our first battle. I'm not useless, and I'm not weak. Itsuki listened in awe. It was so new to him how strong-willed someone else could be. Midoriya was the first to ever pose a challenge on his own, and now he was announcing it to his face. He couldn't stand being told that someone else could be the best, yet for some reason, it felt right to compete with him. Do you hear me? I've changed. Izuku re-stanced himself to be at eye level. From now on, Deku is the name of hero. Everyone who heard gasped, and their eyes went wide. Kendo and Iida halted any decision that would continue their action. Katsuki stood bewildered by the Greenette's announcement. The monitor room was silent as the people who remembered the insult's old meaning turned back to Uraraka. She had an unreadable expression. It wasn't angry or embarrassed, simply floored. Her eyes were wide and her lips were barely parted until slowly but surely a smile curled her mouth's corners. Midoriya was her first friend in the UA, but now she wasn't sure what she was to him after saying those words. Some could say he's put too much faith in people, especially with how he's been treated by them before. Midoriya had found the emotional word vomit endearing enough to show it as something meaningful to him. If one were looking at these events transpire from the outside, as a deity even, a question would form in this legend. Just how much would he affect the others around him? Bakugo and Midoriya stared at each other with heated spirits, both not wanting to waver. Itsuka, unbeknownst to them, was close to achieving her goal, but Midoriya wasn't changing his decision to keep Bakugo busy for a little more. Bakugo started strategizing as Midoriya launched into a short jump for an axe kick, which he quickly guarded against the overhead assault. He was absorbing my explosions since they were made of flames, but he didn't move for a second when he wasn't on the roof. So if I force him to absorb more, then he'll have to sit still for longer, he thought as he aggressively shook off Izuku's attack. Entirely disregarding the possible reduction of points, Bakugo calls out in their excitement to Izuku. "Hey Deku." Bakugo pulled the lever of his gauntlet back, a pin protruded out of the side. "You're good at analyzing quirks, right? If the extras at the support course made these like I asked them to, then you'll know what I mean when I say, I'm all loaded up." Bakugo threatened to pull the pin, prompting Izuku to grin confidently. All Might, however, had other ideas, knowing the lethality of his gear. "Stop. Bakugo, if you use that gauntlet, you'll kill him." "It's alright, All Might sir. I can do this, I did it before. See, he can take it." Bakugo's grin grew bigger once he pulled the safety pin. A massive burst of explosions rushed at Midoriya. He positioned his right leg forward and stuck out his right hand to absorb the fire, inhaling it at the same time. The loaded blast began to diminish almost immediately, though it locked Midoriya in place. This encouraged Bakugo's advancement, and he successfully landed a full-power explosion to his opponent's gut as soon as he got close enough. Midoriya's absorption ceased, and he was thrown back towards the wall. He realized through his pain and emotional state that he needed to minimize the structural damage. The remainder of what he couldn't absorb had made a small crater in the floor where he used to stand. To win this, he needed to knock Bakugo out completely, and he had one last trick to do it. Katsuki immediately perked up the moment Izuku began another enhancement, his strength and firepower, and being enough trouble, as it was after all. Midoriya's surprise power came in the form of yellow and blue bolts that danced across his skin, mostly around his bandages. Midoriya then pulled his hand back, as if to position himself for a bell clap, only to yell, as he swung his arms back. "Together Guile's sonic boom movements. Olympian Crescent." The lightning wave of said shape shot forth at a high speed and struck Bakugo square in the collarbone, effectively knocking him out. Yet another crater had formed, but this time, the addition was the holes on both sides of the hull. They weren't massive, still large enough to consider though. Itsuka was running low on steam, but she had managed to tucker out Iida faster than herself. Her hands were enlarged and spread out to either side entrances in a hugging position, ready to stop the engine user from escaping. Iida charged suddenly forward and Itsuka sidestepped, only for him to rocket right back over her and towards the wall. Itsuka was almost about to drop from exhaustion until she heard a familiar voice. "Kendo, attack." Izuku moonsault over her and launches a bolt of fire and lightning towards the space between Iida and the bomb, forcing the engine user to roll away for safety. She went on the defensive, stopping him from maneuvering around her, enough for Izuku to make for the weapon in a flash of speed. Once again, the floor caved in where he was only a second ago, but it didn't matter. Midoriya's hand was on a paper match bomb. Still, it couldn't hurt to learn how to stop breaking a floor or two. Conscious but exhausted, the participants made their way to the monitor room for the evaluation. Katsuki was sent to the infirmary after it was revealed that his collarbone had indeed shattered, making Izuku a bit apprehensive to see him again. Itsuka entered the dark room, followed by Iida. Midoriya could hear cheering on the other end, and it erupted to its peak the moment he entered the room. He bashfully rubbed the back of his head and had to resist putting his mask back on to hide the incoming blush, only remaining unveiled once All Might called everyone to attention for the evaluation. "Good work to all my Wanderer students. You embodied the meaning of the school motto, plus ultra. Now, for the MVP of this final round, who can tell me their choice and reasoning?" Yaoi Rozu curtly raised her hand to voice her decision. "It was Midoriya, sir. Not only did he devise a plan, but he sparsely used his clearly destructive power so as not to cause too much structural damage. To add to this, Midoriya was smart enough to use a psychological approach for a plan of attack, acknowledging the usual instance in which a villain holds a vendetta for specific heroes. Finally, he was wise enough to withhold a secret technique for a last-minute use, effectively eliminating the biggest threat. All Might shook, as if he was constipated, and the rest of the class started, amazed at the rich girl's analysis. "Wow, she practically said everything." "Yes, that is exactly correct. Good war. Actually, I'd like to say my choice. If I may, All Might sir." Izuku gathered stares from the room occupants, some being rather confused. He mustered confidence, though not much was needed, as the rush of the aftermath was still pumping through him. "I believe the MVP of the exercise is Kendo, and not for biased reasons." His face was confident and had a small smile. Kendo flinched in surprise at his announcement. "The first reason is the damage I caused. While some of it can be attributed to Bakugo, the damage I caused was not excusable. It was minimal with my uses, but my actions were done specifically because of the controlled environment, when in real life we can't ever foresee or determine a structure's safety. Like All Might said, villains draw attention away by hiding, usually in easily overlooked hideouts, which tend to be pretty rundown. Our combined power would have leveled the building, maybe even injuring any hidden hostages. The second is that Kendu kept a leveled head both emotionally and physically, powering through her exhaustion to complete the task. I allowed emotion to guide my decisions ever so slightly, making it more rash and impulsive. Kendu also built upon my advice, using it and the layout to her advantage to corner Iida's quirk by cutting off his necessary space. Lastly, she spurred into action on a last-minute notice. Her ability to adapt even in her tired state gave me the defense I needed to secure our victory. Aoi Rozu looked the most flabbergasted, seconded only by All Might. The class was surprised at such an explanation, as extensive as it was. Yes, that is true, young Midoriya. Excellent reflection of your efforts. Yes, compared to my argument, you have a much better understanding of the exercise. Her face had a clear signature of disappointment, made evident by the mirthless smile. Aoi Rozu, her eyes went up to meet Izuku's, who had an uplifting smile. Don't worry about not getting it on the dot this time. Your analysis may have lacked details like mine, but only because I had first-hand experience with it. Yours were well thought out, and All Might was clearly going to accept them, not because it was the only evaluation given, but because they were well compassed. We're not expected to be as good as the pros off the bat, competent for sure, but even the best pros come down to just being humans with flaws like everyone else. We're in the UA to get better, so smile, okay? They couldn't be any more surprised. Midoriya gave up his praise, sung some to his partner, and comforted a classmate. He was showing a level of maturity and capability that almost rubbed off as innocence. Even the smile he was giving Yaoi Rozu had all the optimism in the world, and then some. Thank you, Midoriya. Her smile was genuine this time, and it was just as hopeful as he was for the future. So far, Midoriya had been proving to be a whole other person under the mask of a hero. As a person, he shines just as bright, but it's hard to hide something that isn't something that doesn't exist. Soon Midoriya would have to face himself for what he was and learn just how much the party despised of himself was important. Bakugo approached the figure standing by the gates. It was the same guy who beat him fair and square, and he hated that. Yet it also felt right, so right that he let out an amused snort with a tiny smirk upon hearing Midoriya's apologies. Relax. I'll take the bandages off tomorrow, so cool, nerd. Izuku sighed in relief, but was then met by a challenging tone. But don't think your ass is gonna be sitting on top all pretty for long, I'll make sure to show you who's the sidekick. His confident girl was back, relieving Midoriya yet again. He was still acknowledged. Well, let's go home then. The others should be out soon too. After a couple moments, Midoriya could spot Uraraka and Iida making their way towards them. Both pairs began to converse until something caught Uraraka's eyes. It was a little figure that hung loosely from the inside of his blazer. It was adorable, but she couldn't remember what it was called. Hey Deku, what's that? Izuku turned with a smile at her use of the insult-turned affectionate nickname, noticing her eyes pointedly staring at his blazer. Following her gaze, Midoriya eyed his beloved Lucky Charm, as he called it. His cheeks became lightly dusted in red, but not from embarrassment, rather from a deep fondness. It was giddy warmth that grew even more when he unclipped it and held in his hands out to the afternoon light. Oh, this. It's a gift I got from someone a long time ago. I was 4 when I got it, and ever since then, I've been keeping a promise to them that I'd stick to my dream. He remembered all those years ago, a sandbox behind him. He never loved how his body still felt the ghosts of that memory's brutality, but it was made worth it when he would reach the end. That sweet voice that told him he was their hero, only to be told they had to go. His reminiscing was cut short by Uraraka, who was giggling at Izuku's name for his attention. What's so funny? He tilted his head, as if to mimic a cute puppy. Nothing, it's just we passed the gate just now, and you've been staring off into space silly. She retorted with even more bursts of her heavenly joy. It made him blush, and Katsuki's 2 cents didn't help. I almost thought you were gonna start your weird muttering again. His comment turned Uraraka's giggles and chuckles. At Midoriya's home, Midoriya gave a genuinely happy greeting to his mother. She still couldn't believe her ears when Inko heard her baby boy tell her about his day and friends. It was a mother's dream and job to see their children happy. She could only wish it lasted for life now, or at least every moment it could be present. What made her so happy was that Izuku didn't drop into his usual state of depression. She never told him, but she'd notice how the solace of his home would soon leave and be replaced by a feeling of inadequacy. It seemed the dark cloud was irritated when forgotten and refused to be ignored for so long, vying for the attention of his mind and heart only for it to succeed. Sweetie, she needed to get it out now. Just for the hell of it. Izuku turned to meet his mother just before making for the bathroom. I've always said you'd make me proud, but I'm just stunned. Stunned that somehow, you've managed to make me prouder. She whimpered as tears of joy began to leak. Izuku only smiled, his own eyes beginning to sting and threatened a cascade of tears. He hugged his mom and said, "And you've made it possible for me to somehow, some way, love you even more, mom." That was it, that's all it took. A waterfall of joy poured from her eyes. She couldn't care less about having been divorced or having her youth sweated away, knowing her son's happy face was at home was all that mattered. She then remembered something that she thought would be interesting to surprise her son with, so she compassed herself. "Oh sniffle sweetie. I got a new job, it pays really well. I think it's actually quite the surprise for you." "Wait, really, that's great, mom, how surprising is it?" Inko held back her chuckle and smiled at him. "You'll see tomorrow." Meanwhile, at UA, Ryukyu was looking through the footage of her students' battle trials, visibly pleased with what she had to work with. Her students had so much potential, as it was, so smooth sailing was assured through the years. The last of the rounds was her two best going at it, Bakugo and Midoriya. Those two were going to be an interesting part of UA's history that she was certain of. As she examined the footage for feedback, All Might entered the teacher's lounge in his emaciated form. He'd revealed his secret to the other staff members so as to avoid inconveniences and provide a safe haven of sorts for himself, allowing him the chance to transform for classes only. "Hello All Might, doing well I hope. She may be number 9 on the charts, but you couldn't help but smile when All Might was around." He curtly responded and smiled in kind. "Just fine, thank you. I actually needed to speak to you about Midoriya." "Oh, and what would that be?" Well, All Might began, though he was thinking on how to word his next request. "I want you to keep an eye on young Midoriya. I have interest in him and not for being my recommended student. Is he in trouble? I'll do my best to handle any problems with him for you." Her offer was genuine. She was fair and mature, but the Dragoness wasn't shy of any strict efforts to correct her students. "Oh no, far from it. I simply suspect something of his power in a good way. He may very well have more to offer than he knows, and I'd like some observations to be made for this curiosity of mine. If it's not too much trouble, of course." "Not at all. I mean, he must be something special to catch your eye. Every quirk can evolve or change after all." With that, All Might thanked her and made his way out for his own business. Deciding to begin completing the favor, she watched the footage with more interest. After a couple of minutes, Ryukyu had begun to replay the segment in which Izuku starts absorbing Katsuki's gauntlet shot. The movements of the flames into his hands and mouth were mesmerizing, they danced so naturally to their captor, as if it were their purpose. A few minutes passed, and she took a sip of her coffee in wonder of her student, that is until she noticed something. "Wow, Midoriya has some serious power. I wonder what bluff is." Her laptop screen was now covered in milky brown, having spattered drink from surprise. As far as her knowledge was concerned, Izuku's quirk was a kind of varying power set that had both strength and versatility, with not too many visible changes to his own body. For 3 whole seconds of the video, a strange phenomenon appeared on the right side of his head as he swallowed the blaze. She eyed the change curiously, mixed with an expression that made it seem as though the computer had just begun to interrogate her. She zoomed in to make sure she wasn't imagining or misinterpreting something. Though it only confirmed the visual to be real. "Is that fur?" 5 hours later, Midoriya was looking over his notes and had taken Katsuki's advice about fine-tuning his new ultimate move. He'd only had it for a little over a week, but it was already fairly powerful. It was enough to knock out Bakugo after all. He was wondering how to strengthen the hold on his quirk, even though the only instance that he remembered was during the exercise. Still, he didn't want to risk it and repeat a day like the first one. There was another thought that surprised Izuku, even more so that he was willing to try it. He wanted to see how it felt, just for a second. Maybe that would ease the episodes a little more. It was worth a shot, and, as long as it didn't flare out completely, it was fine. Placing his notebooks aside, he sat up at the edge of his bed, calling on the rarely acknowledged power. His eyes closed, and in the pit of his stomach, he could feel a spreading burn. His skin turned a shade of gold, and he flinched upon feeling it. It died down soon enough, and he had to admit it felt good. Good, as in, if he continued to do it, he would most likely form a habit. It quickly rushed back to him, the absurdity of what he just tried to do and, once again, lulled his quirk back to silence. It was so strange, and he didn't want to pry any further into that rabbit hole, even if it felt nice. Okay, yeah, he needed to go to bed. The next day, Tatsuma had several important matters to take care of with her class. "Alright class, I hope you are all doing well." The class answered unanimously with an almost kindergarten-like tone. It was clear they liked their homeroom. "Yes, Miss Tatsuma." She giggled at her reception with the students. "Today, we have an important decision to make. Something that will change your years at UA forever." Some of the students tensed up nervously, sans Bakugo, who looked more aloof about the announcement than anything. "You're going to choose a class president." Everyone gave a collective sigh followed by a chorus of eager self-advertisements. "Pick me. I want to be president." President Ishido is the prime choice. It was only when Iida snapped his arm up at an almost unhealthily straight position that everyone quieted down. Everyone lower your hands, the position of class president is not a job given to leisure. It takes dedication and honesty to honor such a position meant for leading others. Let's be wise about this and select our leaders by a voting process. Shiro and Jiru had deadpan expressions on their faces towards his suggestion, Jiru being the first to speak up. Well, to begin with, your hands raised the highest. There's also the issue that we've barely known each other for a day, so if we vote, it'll be for ourselves. Momo added her own thoughts. Iida has a good point however. Since familiarity and trust is the issue, then someone who has more than one vote to themselves will mean others trust them enough for such a position. The class couldn't argue with that logic and universally agreed with a nod. Soon, white chalkboards with markers were passed out and everyone was quick to give a vote. The results were a little too biased for everyone's taste, even the winners. Well, winner if you want to look at it from a technicality. Top 4 candidates, Izuku Midoriya. 5 votes, Momoyaoi Rozu. 3 votes, Itsuka Kendo and Kitsuki Bakugo tied at 2 votes. Midoriya was now nervous, as all hell with enough shaking to cause a tremor. Standing next to him was the wealthy student herself. Seriously? Ryukyu had to fight back a giggle at his misfortunes, or was it good fortune in this case? Aoi Rozu seemed a little disappointed but ultimately comfortable with the arrangement. Having been on the receiving end of his heroic soul, she wasn't at all surprised to see him leading the class. Well then, it's official. Midoriya is class president and Yaoi Rozu will be vice president. Now at lunch, Midoriya took sheepish bites of his food. He still couldn't believe that 5 other classmates had voted for him. It was surreal to think someone actually would look to him for advice. Whistle, Deku. Are you there? Izuku snapped up to see Uraraka waving a hand in his face. Oh, sorry. Just not sure how to take this whole class president thing. Who voted for me anyways? Iida, Uraraka, Asui, Bakugo surprisingly, and Kirishima all raised their hands sheepishly to answer him. Midoriya was touched, even with Bakugo's reasoning. I voted for your ass cause I didn't care about it and didn't feel like doing it. I'm strong enough to lead myself. Hello everyone, is there anything else you all would like to have? A sweet voice made itself known and was answered with polite responses. Izuku was a little more than surprised but mostly happy about the identity. Mom? Oh dear, I didn't think I'd see you so soon sweetie. Giggle Inko, who was now sporting a lunch rush-inspired uniform. The other students were shocked and kind of excited to see who had raised a powerhouse of a child. To her credit, she seems just as much of a bowl of sunshine as her son. It was dawned on Izuku that his food was oddly familiar. Wait, bro. Your mom works here? Nice. Kirishima gave his best toothy grin at both him and Inko. I took it to his friends. He speaks highly of you all, it's a pleasure to meet you. Midoriya reddened with embarrassment, all the while receiving coos and smiles from his classmates. There was just no way he could get any more innocent. So, I'm guessing your new job is one of Lunch Rush's cooks. I knew I tasted Auntie's Oyakiden. The class made a mental note to ask either of the two about Bakugo's honorifics. Ishido and Uraraka were radiating pure joy and fluff when they asked. Wait Ms. Midoriya, so does that mean you made this tonkatsu? I hope it's good enough for you sweetheart. The class promptly grew stars as noted how delicious her cooking was, minus Midoriya and Bakugo who were already used to it. Ishido then walked over to Inko and glomped onto her out of joy. Ms. Midoriya, please don't ever leave this cafeteria. Better yet, get promoted. Inko and the others giggled while some students turned to laughter as Iida began berating Ishido for her breach of personal space. Please sweetie. Any friend of my son doesn't need to be so formal, Inko is just fine. Ishido only bubbled even more, the rest of the girls cooed and the boys smiled fondly. Kaminari whispered to Shiro. Dude, I'm not hounding her when I say this with how nice she is and this kind of cooking, any guy would be lucky to have her for a wife. Shiro adamantly agreed, though Kaminari was starting to regret his thoughts when he noticed Midoriya looking down at his lap for a few seconds, like he was contemplating something in a not-so-healthy view. Scaring them out of their fluffy introduction to Midoriya matriarch was a loud blaring alarm. Unbeknownst to them, a figure clad in black with shaggy pale blue hair watched with glee as the reporters greedily ran in for a scoop. Back inside, the students had begun to panic. It was bad, as no one seemed to hear him, and to make matters worse, he could feel the rush of his quirk pumping through his body. His purple-haired classmate Jiru was then shoved onto him, making him blush to the max as he felt her petite figure rub on him. Looking down, she was completely unaware from his perspective of their position. Kayaka then accidentally whipped him with her flailing jacks in the face. Ow. Sorry Midori. It was clear she was in no way comfortable either. Midoriya looked behind him through the window, he then saw the swarm of paparazzi from the morning piled at the entrance, demanding their interview for All Might. His thoughts were then cut as he heard a familiar yelping of, "Sweetie, I need help." His mother was reaching out to him, both him and Jiru panicked for the plump woman. "Mom. Ms. Midoriya." His quirk was burning up and it would flare up any moment, but the stampede of students continued to obliviously panic over the unknown reporters. It didn't help that upon seeing his mother in distress, he became absolutely livid at their behavior. Well, they made him class president, time to prove their logic right. He spotted Uraraka and found a way to alleviate his flaring. Jiru, can you use your jacks to get Uraraka's attention?" Jiru did so without hesitation, trusting him fully in the heat of the moment. Doing as he instructed, Uraraka then turned to her friend to see Izuku stretching his hand to her and Jiru's jacks retracting. "Deku. I need you to make me weightless, it's just the reporters from the morning. I'm gonna try and calm everyone down." Taking Uraraka's hand, he floated upwards and hesitated before finally letting loose. "Here goes." Whoosh. Midoriya breathed a torrent of flames, the sudden change of light making everyone halt. It was all he could do to try and assuage his urging quirk, plus it allowed everyone to calm down. The start of his flames was blinding. The fire that he made spun in a vortex, almost like a whirlpool in form. It was both beautiful and intimidating. All Jiru could think of was how the hell he could go from such a meek, admittedly cute dork to such a punk rock badass. Izuku finished his exhale of heat and faced the crowd down with a stare that sent shivers down even Bakugo's spine. His voice had a tone of understanding and sternness, but his face matched its authority. He was in no mood for arguments or opposition. "We are students of UA. The press have made it in, and nothing else, there is no villain. Remain calm, as you are injuring those around you, and return to the cafeteria for further notice from the teachers. Do I make myself clear?" His response was all the students beginning to acquiesce to his orders instantly. As Uraraka disabled his quirk, he landed gracefully and immediately leapt for his mother. After making sure she was okay, Uraraka was joined as they praised Midoriya for his act. "Now that is why we chose you as our class prez," said Jiru, who got Midoriya to blush of course. Never could a mother feel so proud. After the hectic day that occurred, his mother and him were ready to head home. While she familiarized herself with the lunch rush a bit more before leaving, Midoriya was in the classroom fixing his stuff. Patting himself down to make sure he had everything, he accidentally unclipped his charm and it rolled behind him. It reached Yaoi Rozu's foot, but when she got a closer look at it from her hand, she gasped. The rich girl picked it up and handed it to Midoriya as she finally had her answers why the fellow recommended student was of such curious interest for her. She remembered him. "Excuse me, Midoriya." He looked up at her as she placed the tiny doll in his hand. The Matryoshka doll. "Oh thanks Yaoi." She quickly took the chance to envelope his hands with her own, pressing the doll further in. "Midoriya," she let out a breath as she began to blush at their intimate contact. She was just hoping her gut was right about her suspicion. There was a sand pit and 3 bullies. Midoriya freezed, not noticing that the rest of the class had stopped to watch the interaction. "Wait, how do you?" "There was a little girl who looked just like this doll, you stopped the bullies from hurting her. You were 5. Midoriya was beginning to get anxious. "What are you talking about?" He was once again cut off by something that calms his nerves as quickly as they had been worked up. There were 5 Izuku. Emotional signals pinged all over his body, he could feel his breath stifling from the sudden revelation. He felt so stupid as well, how could he have not remembered her? He ventilated through his words, overwhelmed by emotion and shock. "Yaoi Momo Yaoi Rozu no how why didn't you recognize me sooner?" Tears were beginning to sting his eyes, Yaoi Rozu coming closer to letting her own fall. Those words blasted all hesitation away and they quickly embraced one another, both resting their tear-stained faces in the crooks of each other's necks. "You kept our promise," whimpered Momo. She was crying lightly from pure joy and a nostalgic warmth. She tightened his hold on him, refusing to be separated. "Heroes keep their promises, I very well wasn't going to fail so soon." The class was confused but ultimately pieced together as childhood friends who have finally reunited. They watched with giddy smiles and amused with shock at the affectionate reunion. "So, are you two like old friends or something?" They both turned to see Mina with a smile that reflected everyone's thoughts right now. They soon realized their position and separated as fast as they got together, though that didn't stop them from letting out an embarrassed giggle. Uraraka was practically glowing from the cute display and Bakugo had a tiny smirk. They had some explaining to do. Izuku looked at Yaoi Rozu and she looked at him. It was going to be an interesting time explaining, but it was fine. The best things in life are often the simplest ones. Though Midoriya was quickly learning that they don't come with simple explanations. Thanks for watching my video, see you next time, till then sayonara.